Have you ever noticed how calmly saying, "I don't believe," can make the room go silent? It's strange, right? One sentence. And suddenly, people shift in their seats. Religions preach love, confidence, divine truth, yet few things make them more uncomfortable than someone who simply opts out. Why? Because atheists don't just reject gods, they expose something deeper. That belief isn't universal, that morality doesn't always need permission, and that quiet truth is terrifying to any system built on control. Today, we're not attacking religion. We're asking one unsettling question: why does every modern religion secretly fear atheists? Let's start with what that fear really hides. The mirror no one wants to face. Atheists scare religion, not because they fight it, but because they don't need it. They're proof that meaning, morality, and purpose can exist without divine supervision. That's terrifying to systems built on the idea that humans are lost without guidance. When an atheist simply lives, helps a friend, raises a family, finds beauty in the world, it breaks the spell. It says, "Look, the world doesn't collapse when you stop pretending to know." That moment creates tension, not because the atheist is angry, but because their existence becomes a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable when they show what we're not ready to see. It's not hatred that religion feels toward atheists, it's reflection. Because if a person without faith can still be kind, moral, and fulfilled, then maybe goodness doesn't come from above at all. Maybe it comes from within, from empathy, from understanding, from the shared human experience. That idea shakes the foundation. If morality doesn't need God, then entire structures of power, guilt, and obedience lose their grip. So instead of facing that truth, belief systems push it away. They label it dangerous. They call it rebellion. They call it arrogance. But what they're really doing is building walls against doubt. Because doubt spreads. It whispers questions like, what if we've been good all along, without needing to be watched? And that's the question no sermon wants echoing in the back of every believer's mind. So they turn the mirror into a monster. They demonize what they fear to face, because deep down they know the atheist isn't the threat, the reflection is. Doubt is contagious. Doubt spreads faster than belief. You don't need a megaphone, just a question. One honest question can undo a lifetime of certainty, because belief is built on repetition, but doubt only needs a single spark. That's why religions treat doubt like a virus. They quarantine it, they shame it, they moralize it. You're not just curious, you're testing God. But curiosity isn't rebellion, it's the mind trying to breathe. Still, in many systems, asking questions is the first step toward exile, because one person's doubt threatens the group's illusion of unity. Faith, after all, thrives on collective certainty. It needs everyone nodding in rhythm, repeating the same truths, so no one hears the silence underneath. But when someone walks away, quietly, peacefully, without drama, and still finds meaning, something shifts. The illusion cracks. And suddenly others start wondering, could I live without it too? That question spreads faster than any sermon can stop it. Because it doesn't attack, it invites. That's what makes atheism so disruptive. Not because it's loud, but because it's calm. It doesn't demand you believe anything. It just shows, by example, that belief isn't required to live well, to love deeply, to act morally. And once people see that, faith stops feeling inevitable, it starts feeling optional. And when belief becomes a choice instead of a rule, control begins to fade. That's the real fear. Not that atheists are wrong, but that they're fine, happy, fulfilled, free. Because if doubt can exist without despair, then the walls of fear that hold faith together start to look less like protection and more like a cage. The power problem. Let's be honest, religion has never been just spiritual, it's political. It always has been. Because power needs obedience, and nothing enforces obedience like the promise of heaven or the fear of hell. You can't see either, but you're told they see you. It's the oldest surveillance system in history, the all-seeing eye that never sleeps, never questions, never forgets. That kind of power doesn't need soldiers, it only needs believers. Atheists remove that leverage. They break the spell of invisible authority. They answer to no cosmic judge, no eternal scoreboard. Their morality isn't outsourced, it's self-chosen. And that's dangerous to any institution built on obedience. Because a person who thinks for themselves is hard to rule. They don't respond to guilt. They don't tremble at threats of fire or promises of paradise. So religions do what all systems of control do. They turn independence into sin. They brand unbelievers as corrupt, arrogant, lost. Not because they are, but because freedom looks like rebellion to those who depend on control. Throughout history, the pattern repeats. When people think for themselves, priests lose followers, kings lose loyalty, and hierarchies lose relevance. The church calls it heresy. The rulers call it chaos. But in truth, it's liberation. Because atheism doesn't remove morality, it removes the middleman. It says, you don't need divine permission to be good, to be kind, to be human. And that single idea, that morality can exist without authority, is enough to shake centuries of control. That's the real power problem. Not that atheists reject God, but that they reject ownership of their conscience. Because once people realize they don't need to be ruled to do what's right, the whole system starts to tremble. The happiness heresy. Here's something religions rarely admit. They don't just fear atheist ideas, they fear atheist happiness. Because the whole narrative depends on misery without belief. For centuries, the story's been the same. Without God, life is empty. Without faith, there's no meaning. It's a powerful message. It keeps people close, afraid to wander too far. But then, someone does. They leave religion, and instead of falling apart, they thrive. They laugh. They love. They build families, chase dreams, help others, all without divine instruction. That doesn't fit the script. It's not supposed to happen. Because if life without God can still be good, then the fear that keeps people loyal starts to crumble. Believers see this and face a choice: update the story or attack the evidence. Guess which one is easier? It's easier to call the atheist delusional, lost, or secretly miserable than to admit the story might be wrong. Because if happiness can exist without religion, then maybe religion was never the source of it, just the narrator. And that's what makes atheist joy so threatening. It's not loud, it's not mocking, it's peaceful, it's content, it's proof. Proof that you can live well without holy approval. That kindness doesn't need commandments. That meaning doesn't need myth. For centuries, fear has been the glue that held faith together. Fear of punishment, fear of emptiness, fear of what happens if you stop believing. But when someone walks away and finds not emptiness, but freedom, it sends a message louder than any sermon. You don't need to be afraid. And that realization is contagious. Because nothing threatens control like people who stop trembling. The uncomfortable possibility. Here's the truth: religions quietly fear most. That morality might be older than belief. That long before temples and commandments, humans already knew what kindness felt like. They already knew what pain looked like, and didn't want to cause it. That compassion, honesty, and fairness weren't divine inventions, they were survival instincts, empathy written into our biology. Because, if that's true, then religion isn't the source of goodness. It's just one of the stories we've told about it. And when that story starts to crack, so does the power built on it. See, religion loves to take credit for morality. It claims ownership of virtue, as if people wouldn't know right from wrong without a holy rulebook. But watch what happens when an atheist lives with integrity, when they tell the truth, help their neighbors, or stand up for justice, all without expecting a reward in the afterlife. It breaks the formula. It proves that goodness doesn't need supervision, that ethics can stand on empathy alone. And that's a revelation no preacher wants to compete with. Because once morality is shown to be human, not divine, obedience becomes optional. You don't need to fear punishment to be decent. You don't need to worship to care. And that realization rewrites the script completely. It turns morality from a set of commands into a shared responsibility. That's the uncomfortable possibility religion can't control, that we were moral before we were believers. That we didn't learn goodness from gods, we invented gods to explain goodness. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Because suddenly, the question isn't, what does God want me to do? It's, what kind of human do I choose to be? the courage to not know. Religion promises answers. Neat, complete, comforting answers. It says, here's why you're here. Here's where you go when you die. Here's what's right. Here's what's wrong. Everything wrapped in certainty. No loose ends. No confusion. No mystery. But atheism does something radical. It accepts uncertainty. That's not weakness. That's courage. It takes strength to look into the unknown and say, I don't know, and I'm okay with that. Because real life doesn't come with a script. There's no divine manual for every moral choice, every heartbreak, every loss. And yet, somehow, humans still find meaning. We still create love, art, empathy, all without pretending to have all the answers. But to someone raised on certainty, uncertainty looks like chaos. It feels unsafe, unanchored, even sinful. So, atheists get called nihilists, cynics, lost souls, as if not knowing means not caring. But it's the opposite. To admit, I don't know, is to stay curious. It's to keep exploring, to stay open, to keep learning. It's to live without illusions, but not without wonder. Because wonder doesn't belong to religion. It belongs to anyone willing to look at the universe and say, this is bigger than me, and I don't need to invent stories to feel awe. Atheism isn't a denial of meaning. It's the courage to find meaning without guarantees. To see beauty in uncertainty. To trust that not knowing isn't emptiness, it's potential. Because the unknown isn't a void. It's infinite. It's possibility. It's the quiet space where truth can finally breathe, without fear, without dogma, without pretending to know what can't be known. The quiet revolution. Here's the secret no religion wants to say out loud. Atheism is the quiet revolution they can't stop. No wars, no crusades, no fiery sermons or holy books. Just people living, calmly, freely, without fear. Without gods, without guilt, without needing permission to be good. That's what makes it unstoppable. Because it doesn't need to fight to spread. It spreads through example. Every time someone leaves religion and still finds peace, it plants a question in someone else's mind. If they can live free, what's stopping me? That's how fear begins to crumble, not in debate, but in observation. You can't argue with a life well lived. You can't demonize someone who radiates peace. That quiet confidence is more persuasive than any preacher's threat. And that's what terrifies institutions built on control. They can silence critics, ban books, rewrite history, but they can't stop people from noticing happiness. They can't stop people from thinking, maybe I don't need permission to be moral. Atheism doesn't march or demand. It just exists, unbothered, untamed, unafraid. It whispers the most dangerous idea of all. You are free. Free to think, free to question, free to define meaning for yourself. And once someone tastes that freedom, they rarely go back, because there's no fear left to sell, no guilt left to trade. That's why atheism is powerful. Not because it preaches rebellion, but because it quietly models it. One peaceful life at a time, one liberated mind at a time. And that's how every revolution begins, not with noise, but with people who simply stop pretending to be afraid. So why do modern religions secretly fear atheists? Because atheists are living proof of something dangerous, that humans don't need divine authority to be decent, moral, or fulfilled. That we were never broken. That goodness isn't granted, it's grown. That meaning doesn't need mythology to exist. Atheists quietly prove that freedom, real freedom, doesn't require belief, obedience, or fear. And maybe that's what the fear has always been about. Not that atheists are wrong, but that they might be right. Because if humans can be whole without gods, then control loses its grip. If morality can live without commandments, then the curtain falls on divine authority. And if life can still feel sacred without religion, then the story changes forever. That's not blasphemy, that's evolution, a slow awakening from borrowed certainty to self-owned understanding. And here's the beautiful irony. Atheism doesn't destroy faith. It just removes the fear that faith depends on. It asks nothing of you except honesty. Honesty about what you really know, what you actually believe, and what you're brave enough to admit you don't. That honesty is powerful. It's contagious. It's the kind of truth that makes old systems nervous. So if this video made you think differently, don't subscribe out of agreement. Subscribe out of curiosity. For truth, for reason, for freedom of thought. Because fear doesn't die from fighting. It dies from understanding. It dies the moment we stop being afraid to think, to question, to live freely. And that, more than anything, is what they've always been afraid of.